Olá e sejam todos muito bem-vindos a este episódio mais do que especial do Tic-Tac-Gol, um podcast da NHL Brasil em parceria com o Fumble na Net, o maior portal de podcasts sobre esportes americanos no Brasil. Eu sou a Erika e por enquanto eu tô aqui sozinha com vocês, mas logo mais vai entrar uma gravação muito especial de uma entrevista que eu, a Ana Gabriela, a Luísa e a Natália fizemos com o Brock McGillis, que é um ex-jogador de hockey que foi o primeiro jogador a assumir sua homossexualidade. Pra quem não sabe, junho é o mês do orgulho LGBTQ+, e dia 28 é o aniversário da revolta de Stonewall, que um ano depois da revolta ocorreu a primeira parada do orgulho gay. Então, dia 28 de junho é conhecido como Dia Internacional do Orgulho LGBTQ+. Por isso a gente optou por lançar essa entrevista hoje. A entrevista é em inglês, para facilitar a nossa conversa na hora, né? Porém, lá no nosso novíssimo canal do YouTube, vocês podem encontrar a entrevista inteirinha, legendada, para quem tem dificuldades para entender a língua. Então eu deixo vocês agora com a Luísa apresentando o nosso convidado e com uma conversa muito incrível. É sério, pode ser um pouquinho longa, mas foi uma conversa maravilhosa.
Esse podcast faz parte do site Fumble na Net. Acesse fumblenanet.com.br.
Hello guys, so today we're here with Brock McGillis. He's a former hockey player. He retired in 2010 and we're here to celebrate Pride Month and we're so excited to have him here. We have been doing this for a while now, you guys know this. And I'm here with Ana Gabriela, Natalia, Erika, and Brock. Hi guys.
Hi.
Hello.
It's nice to meet you all.
Very nice to meet you too. It's a pleasure to be here. I think I speak for all of us, and it's really cool. Thank you so much. So the first question we have here is, can you tell us a little bit about your hockey career? How you knew that you belonged in the ice and that you wanted to play hockey?
Yeah, so I grew up in a stereotypical Canadian kid. I grew up in Northern Ontario where it feels like it's snowing 10 months of the year. And I lived down the street from an arena. And it was a small town outside of Sudbury, Ontario. And my dad knew the arena manager. So every day after school, I'd go to the rink with my equipment, hoping that nobody was on the ice so I could go on. And I would go there even when teams had the ice, hoping that one of their goalies didn't show up and that I could go on with them. And I would spend every single day on the ice. And I got pretty good at hockey. So I continued to move up to different levels. And before I knew it, I went on to play in the OHL in Windsor and Sault Ste. Marie. And then I played professionally in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and in Europe, in the Netherlands for The Hague. And after that, because of some injuries, I took a step back from professional hockey and I went to school at Concordia in Montreal, and I played on the university hockey team there.
That's really cool. I think that every single Canadian kid can relate to your story. I feel like everyone that we have interviewed, we have been with Victoria Back, with Sarah Tinker. They all said the same thing, that they grew up in this Canadian household and they all grew up with hockey. That's super cool. And now going to the part about your personal life and your sexuality, that's more what we're going to talk here. Mm-hmm. When did you know that you were gay and you identify, how was it for you?
So I remember being 6 years old and I was watching a movie with my parents and there was a gay character. And I said, what if I'm gay? And they said, if you're gay, you're gay. You're Brock. We love you. I'm Aww. Pretty sure I went to my room and cried. But I always knew, except it was in the back of my mind because growing up as a hockey player and being pretty good at hockey, my whole identity was hockey related. If I saw relatives, they would ask me about hockey. If I saw, my friends' parents, they would ask me about hockey. It was always about hockey. So that's all I focused on. And as I got a little older and moved on to junior and professional ranks, and I started to then think more about my sexuality. And it became difficult because I was afraid. Men's hockey in particular, isn't necessarily a safe space for an LGBTQ plus person in the locker room, on the ice. There's a lot of homophobic language. There's a lot of different issues. So I became afraid of being me, and I began to resent myself and not want to be me. So I hid it. I became the stereotype of a hypermasculine hockey bro. I'm ashamed to admit this today, but I was a womanizer. I was all the stereotypes that you hear of with, men's professional athletes. And I hated myself. I, wanted to die, and on more than one occasion tried to. I wasn't sleeping. I drank a lot. I was constantly numbing with alcohol, and I was really depressed. And finally, when I was 23, I was living in Europe, and I sat myself down one day and I just said, you need to figure this out. Because I knew two things were happening. One, my hockey career was going to end if I didn't figure it out. And two, more importantly, I was likely, if I kept going down the same path, I was probably going to end up dead. So that's when I came back from that season. I went to Toronto and I went on a date with a guy, and I said, okay, you're gay.
This is it.
Yeah.
And do you think that all this path that you had to go through to accept yourself and to accept like who you are played a part on your decision to be an advocate and to talk about it and to come out publicly?
Yeah, I think so, because I didn't come out publicly for years after. Like I came out publicly. I mean, I was 23 when I started dating men. I came out publicly, I think I was 33 at the time. So like 10 years later, and in that time there was different coming out stages of, coming out to myself, accepting myself, loving myself, and then coming out to my family and people outside of hockey, and then coming out in hockey. But hockey was that last frontier, that most difficult spot to come out. Men's team professional sports still aren't a safe space. And I struggled with it, but then I started thinking like, I had people use my sexuality against me when people start to find out. And I started thinking like, if that's happening to me and I went through all the struggle, it's probably happening to other people. And if I don't use my voice when I can, then I'm going to hurt other people who come behind me and come after me. So I decided to come out publicly to empower myself and hopefully help a few people. And then it sort of changed my life forever. And it's become my job. It's become my work. It's become my passion. It's become my everyday. And I think I didn't realize that I'd become a full-time activist even coming out, because like, I didn't know if anyone would even care, and then people did. And then kids started coming to me, adults started coming to me who were struggling. And I said, wow, like this is, I was in my own bubble where I had my gay friends and then my hockey people. And I didn't see the world yet and the struggle that queer folks are having. And then once I did, I went, wait, no, there's more. I have to do more. And that's how it started. And then I started getting opportunities to speak and do more. And I just couldn't stop, and I haven't stopped.
Yeah, so
that's nice. That's super nice.
Thank you.
On to the next question. Well, since you only came out in 2016, was there any moment in your life before 2016 in which you wanted to come out, but you decided against it? You weren't ready for that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I should have came out when I was 15. I wish I would have. I have a very inclusive and supportive family. My biggest fear, quite honestly, with even just coming out, because I came out to my family probably around 2010. And I was afraid because my family was so involved with hockey. My dad coached AAA and junior hockey and scouted in the OHL. My brother was a first round pick in the OHL and played professionally. And I was afraid that they'd become more sensitive to the language used in locker rooms because now it'd be humanized for them, and stand up to it. And in the process, out me, which would jeopardize any chance I had in the game. So I wanted to come out before. I was out to some people that I really trusted in my life, a few people, but a lot of the time I was just so afraid that it would ruin my hockey career that I couldn't. I mean, I dated somebody for 3 years without a soul in my life knowing. And even for his friends, like back then, we had an alias, so they wouldn't find me on social media and realize who I was and out me. So there was always that fear, but at the same time, I wish I wanted to. I wish I had in hindsight, because I do have an inclusive and supportive family who would have given me the support and resources necessary to be happy and healthy. So yeah, I wish I had, and there were times I wanted to.
Yes. Well, and how do you deal with homophobia and hate? And what do you do to not give up on your fight?
I try and think, like, there's homophobia, there's hate, and whether it's people on the internet or people send me death threats or anything else, I've become so desensitized to it all that it doesn't really faze me. And it's strange, but I remember one time I asked somebody, I'm like, why would you call me these names? You've never met me, you don't know me. Why would you do this? And then I think that like eased them, and their guard went down, and they just said, both my parents abused me as a kid, and I don't know why I do this. And I always think back to that story when I receive hate, because I don't know what that other person's going through in their life that they're projecting onto me. And I try and have empathy and sympathy for the person that, you know, they may be going through something. Do I tolerate it? Absolutely not. But at the same time, I am okay. I have a thick enough skin at this point that I can endure it. And if I can have a conversation with that person and shift it, maybe they won't do it to somebody else who hasn't built up as thick of a skin. Or maybe, you know, if they have children, they'll stop preaching that type of anti-LGBTQ plus hate, that then their kids won't treat other kids poorly. And to me, the more conversations I have, the more I eat, the less other people have to take on that burden. So, and I'm in a privileged position where I can afford to be in therapy and work through all the hate I get. I am a white, cis, masculine presenting man, so there's a lot of privilege that comes with that I don't have to endure the, intersections of additional traumas that other people do. So if I can take some of that burden off other people's plates and deal with it, then I'm okay doing it.
Yes. And the NHL could do much better in being inclusive. And I think that's an opinion that we all have. And in your opinion, how could they become more inclusive, and how could they make it more comfortable for players who are possibly in the community to come out?
Here's my dilemma with the NHL is, and hockey and most men's team sports, is they do all these things like Pride Nights and Rainbow this, and it gives the illusion that things are fine. Mm-hmm. And then I think actually it does more harm than good in the long run, because studies have shown that it doesn't really shift culture. Like there's been studies now that have shown this, that it's not actually impacting locker rooms. And then for people who are like, who don't want to deal with this and don't want to be uncomfortable talking about the homophobia in sport, they go, well, look, we have pride nights. And as if, you know, covering rainbows on everything for a warm up and, you know, having a night is going to eradicate homophobia. Personally, I'm a big believer. I wish they would get rid of all of that. I say it's like celebrating winning, having the Stanley Cup parade before the season even starts. You know, they haven't done the work to celebrate. If you're going to have a pride celebration, do the work to shift your culture. They need to humanize this issue for players. Most sports, hockey is very unique, and I think soccer is somewhat the same in some areas where, you know, it's incredibly insular. In hockey in North America is probably the most insular sport, in the sense that a lot of sports are played at school. Whereas hockey is played off in arenas, right? So every other sport, the soccer team, basketball team, volleyball team, they may all share a locker room. They might all come from different walks of life. They are sharing the courts or the fields with the women's teams and the men's teams, or the boys and girls teams. There's teachers and academics still around as a part of those teams. There's still people in the school like gay straight alliances. You have like kids who want to pursue higher education who are in the school, part of different clubs. Hockey is often an arena. Even if it's a high school team, they're still not at the school. They're often in an arena. They're broken up by gender, and they're typically broken up by age. And then they usually have a coach who comes from the same culture who's influencing them. And it just perpetuates the same behaviors over and over. Mm-hmm. And because they're 6-7 days a week from the age of 8 years old all the way up, and then at 16 they move away from home. Not very many other sports, club teams in soccer do that a bit, I think. But in North America, I think it's the only sport that does that. And so they move away from home, and now they're spending 7 days a week with their teammates who all came from a similar culture in other towns and cities. And now they're spending every day together in these new cities. And then they go home in the summer, and their only friends really are the hockey players they spent every day with them growing up. So they spend all their time training with them. They're always with hockey players, and everyone is presumed to be straight, especially on the men's side. It's 95%, if not higher, white. And it's typically middle to upper class. So there isn't a lot of exposure to diversity at all, which means that in order for them to be exposed to diversity, it's got to be on the league and the teams to expose them, so that we grow the sport, so that we make it more inclusive, so that other people feel a part of the sport. So I think the league, the teams, the NHLPA has to start humanizing these issues. Mm-hmm. You know, I've told them, I said, send me around to all your teams and let me talk to them and share my experiences. Then we can have academics who study this stuff, put together education to then give the players. And at that point, they'll be more receptive and willing to look at education. We can't just force education on people who aren't receptive to it. So we need to humanize the issue, then educate them, and then teach them, if they want to speak on these issues, how to. Because they're not taught how, and there's no manual or anything. And the groups that go in right now and talk to them just say, oh, you can't say this, as opposed to, no, you can say this, or why you can't say certain things. They're not being taught that. So I think we have to do a better job of humanizing and educating, so that it is a safe space, so that the culture changes in those locker rooms. And at that point, then we can celebrate.
Okay, you just said about talking with the teams, right? And I wanted to know, how was the experience of working with the Maple Leafs about homophobia, and have any other teams reached out about this or no?
So working with the Leafs was really good. I mean, we did an hour session where I spoke to coaches, scouts, people in front office from the NHL right down to their East Coast affiliate. Unfortunately, the players weren't on, and that's something I think I'd rather do in person anyway. And it was over Zoom because of COVID and whatnot. There's another team that's reached out recently that I'm talking to about potentially doing something with them. So hopefully it comes about. And it was really impactful, I think. The person who organized it all told me after that she received a lot of texts and emails from people within the organization who, like, we spoke for over an hour and we had to end it, but I was willing, and people just wanted to ask more questions. They wanted to engage more. I think people want to learn, they just don't know what to ask, and they typically don't have a safe enough setting where they can ask these things and might get it wrong, and you know what I mean, and say the wrong thing, so they don't ask. But in this setting, it was safe, where ask whatever you want. You can screw up, I don't care. I'd rather you screw up with me, and then we can work on it, as opposed to going out in society and screwing up in locker rooms and making it unsafe. So it was really good, and the people were very receptive.
Great. And as you said before, you also played in the Netherlands with the Hague, right?
Yes.
And it was before you came out. And did you experience any major differences between the leagues, not only on the game, but on how subjects like the LGBTQ plus community were handled and treated?
Shockingly, I found it very similar. And I didn't think it would be, but I feel like hockey culture is so strong that it, you know, it's an inclusive place, the Netherlands, and it's, you know, but I found the language and behaviors within the culture mimicked and were sort of the same as in North America. And I think it's influenced by a number of things. You have a lot of North American players that come over to play. You have people who come over to coach. And also, like at the time, gong show hockey was big, or now you have like spitting chicklets and things like that that are, you know, prominent in the culture that aren't necessarily promoting inclusion, that people then copy because they think, well, that's the way to be a hockey player. So the same way young kids copy older kids, and older kids copy junior players, and junior players copy NHL players. It's the same thing over there because they want to make the NHL. All these players want to be professional hockey players. So they're copying the culture.
How do you deal with all the hate you receive online? We as women in sports, we know something about hate online.
Yeah, you do.
And yeah, it's very hard. But of course, it's different, right? And you spoke a little about it, but a few days ago, our friend
mainly lately, yes, I was just talking about this, the project you said about the email, and then you starting receiving a lot of hate.
Yeah. One of our friends from the website, he said, like, he didn't know how much hate he received online. He was like shocked. We were like, unfortunately, it's normal. And I want to know, how do you deal with online hate?
So it's interesting now because, like, so I received a lot of hate recently because I was talking about 10 NHL teams partnering with Chick-fil-A. And Chick-fil-A is, you know, is like funding, like they fund conversion therapy. They fund all the anti-trans women in sport bills, or anti-trans kids in sport bills in the United States. They're allegedly behind them all, and they're trying to prevent the Equality Act in America. And they're funding a lot of this, and 10 teams have partnerships with them. And I continue to go back to the point that you can't, say hockey's for everyone, and you have these pride nights, and yet you have teams that are, promoting hate groups. So it's like, you can't have it both ways. And the last time I said it, and I say it pretty frequently, I received a lot of hate. And I don't care. Like, I would rather it come to me than other people. I really would. I see how much hate women get. And I think because I identify as man, I'm masculine presenting. Some people won't come to me with the hate that they might like a more, femme presenting gay guy might get, or a queer person, or just women in general get, because there's still that, masculinity BS that I might beat them up or something. So like now I almost find it like, sometimes I have empathy and sympathy for people, but other times I just like, I expose some of it because I want people to see how it really is for folks. And then I see what my friends who are women go through, and it's even worse if they're opinionated about sports. And I don't get nearly the hate they get. Most of mine come more in DMs. When I'm critical of the NHL or different groups, I get death threats. That happens fairly regularly, more so than, comments on my, Twitter or Instagram or whatnot. And at this point, I don't care. Like, but some of them are real. Like, people have sent me my address. Yeah, it's creepy. But again, if I can take that burden off other people who are dealing with even more stuff than what I'm dealing with, then I'd rather it come to me. I think, social media has to do a better job of controlling that type of thing, so that it's a safe space for everyone. And I think they're doing a terrible job. Like, somebody made a burner account using my exact handle, basically. And it was very bizarre, and was like tweeting at Black Girl Hockey Club in different groups, pretending to be me. And I'm like, I love them. And like, you know what I mean? And that type of stuff really makes me sad. Or the odd time people who are more marginalized than me are upset or think I did something when I didn't, or there's been miscommunications. And those times really hurt me, because like, I don't want people, I want to help. I want to hug people and uplift people and support people. I don't want to add to trauma or burden or anything. So those ones upset me. But like the like idiots who come at me yelling at me because they like really bad chicken, or because they are bigots, like, come at me. The funny part is and not that I'm like anti-violence, but they would that, and that's what I say. I'm like, you're such a coward. Like, hide me from your real account. I like, just they're cowards, and they're bigoted cowards, and it's sad. It's sad for humanity that we're still there. But to me, if I can stand up to it, maybe it'll empower somebody and make them feel like somebody's standing up for them. So I don't mind standing up to it. I don't mind taking the brunt of it. And hopefully it's less for other people, and hopefully it encourages people to see that somebody will stand up for them.
Oh, that's nice. We have been on the last weeks having an issue in our social media with homophobic comments, and I forgot the name. Sorry.
Okay.
But a man talking a lot of shit. Sorry about the language.
Oh, that's okay.
And we had to block them. We had a very sad issue happening too, and people don't understand. They keep on talking, and they keep on commenting these kind of things.
And
but we have a platform,
right?
making fun of and we have like 3,000 followers on Instagram. We have 6,000 on Twitter.
Yeah.
So we can use this platform to help those people that suffer with these comments. Even though sometimes it's us.
Yeah.
The four of us, hard sometimes, but we are for white women too. So even though two of us are from LGBTQ+, we are privileged. So I understand what you're saying about it, but it's hard. It's very hard.
And it sucks, and I'm sorry that's happening, but ultimately I know, and we can get through it, and we can support power in that. And many of you, there's 4 of you here, and that you're not alone, and that's huge.
To ask you about Curtis Gabriel, like he plays for the Sharks and he's a friend of yours, and he's currently the most outspoken player on the NHL about the LGBTQI plus community. And how do you feel about that? Because I've seen him receiving hate from people who are from the community, like you're straight, you shouldn't be talking about this. And I've seen a lot of people like with him and supporting him. So how do you feel like about all this situation and about him being a player and talking about it?
I think everyone wants that perfect ally who gets everything right and does everything perfectly right from day one. The reality is that person doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I explained hockey culture a little bit, the insularity of it and everything else. Curtis comes from that culture. So these aren't issues that have been necessarily humanized for the way it is for the regular person with, people from different races, different, gender identities, different sexual orientation or anything. Curtis is in this straight white man world every single day. And the fact that he puts himself out there, does he do it perfect every time? No. And do I tell him? Yeah. We have a lot of conversations. And I think, I have a little more space for the things that aren't perfect all the time, just because I can call him and be like, hey, man, like maybe you shouldn't have said that, or what were you thinking here? Or, this is how you should word this. But because I know him so well, and because we formed a friendship, I know what his intentions are. And I know that even when there's things that are said wrong, or he rushes to tweet or anything else, he isn't doing it out of malice or hurt or to try and take over the space. He's doing it because he cares. And I think somebody who plays his role in hockey, where it's all about intensity and like there's a lot of aggression in the way he plays hockey, it's go all in right away. And I think that the lesson for him is to slow down. And I think he's starting to learn that. And it makes me sad to see people, and I get it, everyone's going to have their opinions, and you can't be loved by everyone, and that's okay. And people can have their opinions, but I think for him, I know why he does it. He does it because he actually cares. And he's trying to be better all the time. And to me, that's what we need in allies, are people who are trying to be better all the time. So I have all the time in the world for Curtis. And that's not how we started off. Like, I thought he was like just, using Pride tape, and he was a hockey bro. And then, we talked on the phone right after he used it, and he was like, yeah, I just want to be a hockey player. And then it wasn't until like, really? And I was like, because I was like, how are you going to use your platforms now that you're doing this? And he goes, well, I just want to be a hockey player. And it wasn't until a year later that he started to. and I saw him grow and evolve. And I think, we give ourselves so much time and space to grow and evolve as human beings and as queer people, and even accepting our own identities and accepting who we are, that, but we expect others to get it right away and fully get it. And that's not always fair, and it might push people away. And to his credit, it hasn't pushed him away. And he's still trying and still working at it. I mean, he just did autographs where the proceeds went to Black Girl Hockey Club and the Get Real movement, and he just sold hoodies. And I know people were talking about that in a negative way, and which, sure, fine, he's a straight guy selling Pride logoed hoodies, but all the proceeds went to a person's top surgery. Like, we have a white, cis, straight hockey bro doing work to uplift the community, doing work to be a great ally. And not that we have to put him on a pedestal or anything, but, I think we got to give him space to grow and evolve.
For sure. And I think that for us who are involved in the hockey community and see how things are, and for you as a former hockey player, I think it's easier for us to understand him in his positions, like the way he's growing and the way he's evolving, because we know how toxic this culture can be and how like extremely straight and white it is. And as you said, growing up inside of it, it's all homophobia and all these really toxic things. So I think that it's amazing that he's trying to grow out of it and that he's putting himself out there and speaking about it.
And even that, beyond even just putting himself out there and speaking about it to like fans and whatnot, Curtis has conversations with professional hockey players about this stuff a lot that people don't even know about and will never hear about. And Curtis has brought people to me that I've had sit downs with that are NHL players about different issues and feelings they have that might not be inclusive. And I'm able to try and guide them and educate them a little bit on this and humanize it a little and educate them. And there's power in that, because hopefully at some point we have more vocal allies and that are players at professional levels of sport. And it'll be because of people like Curtis who put themselves out there first that will happen, and who are having these conversations behind the scenes that nobody knows about. So, like, I sometimes feel like it's a little unfair that, he's getting this, but people, it's perception versus what's going on. And people don't know about the stuff he does behind the scenes either.
Yeah, and hearing that is super cool, because not all players and not everyone is ready to be so outspoken and be so out there, just exactly because the community is so toxic. And I saw when Buffalo and Pittsburgh did that joint Pride night, that the comment sections were just horrible. And I looked at it and I was like, maybe that's why we don't have any gay or LGBTQI plus players that are open about it, because of this. This is the reason why. So it's crazy sometimes, and it's really cool that you guys are doing this and working with them.
Well, yeah, and you look at it, like the comments from fans and whatnot, that's influenced by somewhere. That's from the culture of the sport. So if fans are acting that way in the comments and they feel like it's fine to do, they're hearing it somewhere. That means there's people in the sport, and it doesn't mean it's all of them, but there's people in the sport who are talk that way and act that way and behave that way and believe that stuff. And there's too many people that aren't speaking out against it. And, so it's not a safe space for a gay player to come out or a queer player to come out, because they, fear for their career. They fear for their, opportunity in the sport. So we need more vocal allies, and we need people who will stand up to the locker room to the language in locker rooms. We need people to stand up in the comments, and we need people to say this isn't okay.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think that if we tried to bring this awareness into the locker rooms from younger players, like in the junior leagues and in the minor leagues, it would like help to build a more comfortable place, a more safe space? And because I think that people talk a lot about the NHL and the NHL and the NHL, but I think that things could also start from the beginning and from the bottom and then grow into like the future players and build a more comfortable zone.
Yeah, I've said for a long time now that I think there's a 3-tier approach where you have to do bottom up, grassroots to the top, but at the same time you have to do the top down, and the middle part will be junior and NCAA. And the junior players and NCAA players have the most influence because they are looked at the same way as professional players. They're like celebrities in these communities. I say they're similar to like an Instagram influencer or a YouTuber, where they're kind of famous, but they're still your neighbor. You know what I mean? Whereas Connor McDavid's like Brad Pitt. Like you're not going to see Connor McDavid on the street or like, you know, in the grocery store maybe or whatever. But these junior players are going to school with their peers. They're accessible. If you're in NCAA, you're in class with your peers all the time, right? And they're accessible to the community. So they're influencing youth. Adults still cheer for them the same way they do NHL players. So there's so much there that they have influence over, that I think they arguably have the most influence on hockey culture, and they're being influenced by NHL players, and then they're influencing youth players. So I think, you know, if we have a 2-tier system, but ultimately it meets in the middle, that will really shift the culture of hockey. And it can't just be the NHL. These junior leagues have to do more because they're really problematic. I share stories about them all the time. There's a lot of homophobic language, but I've gone and spoken across a bunch of them. And every time I talk to a team, these kids don't even realize the impact of their words. They don't realize any of it. And they've conformed fully to a culture. It's funny. I can go anywhere in Canada and I'll be able to tell who plays hockey. And I'm sure in Brazil, you can tell who plays soccer. Yeah. They dress the same, they talk the same, they walk the same, they act the same. I was talking to a sports school in Toronto on Zoom 2 weeks ago. And usually every time I speak to a school in person, I try and pick out one of the hockey kids in the crowd and ask them a question. I was able to do it on Zoom. Wow. I asked a high school kid a question, and then afterwards he added me to Instagram, and he was an OHL first round pick and going to play in the OHL this year. And I said, I knew you were a hockey player. I knew it. Mm-hmm. But there's so much conformity that we even got to break that down. And it starts at those levels. So like when I go into locker rooms now, beyond talking about like homophobia and whatnot, like they can't even be themselves. They can't even like the things they like. You're allowed to talk about women, sports, partying, and gaming. That's it. Maybe music. But everything else is off limits. So now one thing I try and do after I've humanized issues and talked about my life and educated them a bit on language, I get them to share something they typically wouldn't share with a teammate that they enjoy. And I've had fighters say, I love writing poetry. I had a coach of a major junior team say, I love going to Broadway musicals. Like I had another player say, I want to be a zoologist if I don't make the NHL. And then a first year player jumped out of his seat and said, really? I love animal documentaries. But now they're bonding on a deeper level because they're not allowed to do that in this sport. And we got to make space for them to be able to do that.
For sure. That's really important. It's amazing. So I think that
if the questions, only the last one is not actually a question, but could you leave a message for anyone in the LGBTQ plus community that wants to work with hockey, either playing or as a journalist or in the industry, but are afraid of not being accepted because of their sexuality?
I say this this is something I live by now is and pardon my language, but acceptance is bullshit. You don't need acceptance from anyone but yourself. Only you can accept you. If you're concerned about acceptance from the sport, the culture, your peers, your colleagues, then you're creating hierarchies that they're above you and they're not. We're all equal. But first you need to accept yourself, because only you can accept yourself. And when you do, learn to love you. I say everywhere I go, I love being a gay man, because that matters and that's important. And more people need to hear that. And when you love your identity, you're not going to care what other people think, and nobody's going to get in your way. When you fully love and embrace yourself, nobody will get in your way. And if you need support along the way, reach out. My DMs are open. Sometimes I'm slow getting back, but I will answer you. And this space is for you. I'm working on a project right now where in the last week, I've interviewed about 55 queer people who are involved in hockey, and we have about 100 interviews booked. And this space is for you. And we're going to make it so you realize it's for you. But in the meantime, reach out, because I'm always here, and you belong in this sport.
That's awesome. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was it. So thank you, Brock, for being here with us today. It was awesome. It was really amazing getting to know you more and getting you to answer all these questions. It's really important to us to bring this platform and to use our voices to bring these important subjects to everybody. So thank you very much.
Well, and thank you. I think it's what you're doing is so important. I'm so grateful you reached out, and I'm so thrilled to see, women in Brazil engaging in hockey, and you're going to shift the culture just by existing and being part. So thank you.
We hope so.